Podcasters have been predicting the death of radio since 2004, but it hasn't happened. Today, radio's making a big push into podcasting. And if podcasters are smart, they'll ride that wave and gain new listeners. Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. If you don't believe me that radio's making a big push into the podcasting space, just do me a favor. Go to your favorite news source, or just go to Google, click on the news tab, and search in radio podcasting. You will see a very large list of things that are happening where radio has finally, and they've been doing it for a while to be totally honest, understanding that podcasters are audio listeners, they make audio, so therefore, let's make a big push into podcasting. And that's been great, and they've been doing that for some time now. Leading the charge are companies like the BBC, if you are the British or European bent, as well as iHeart Radio here in the States, and lots of other companies getting into that. CBS Radio. I won't name all of the big players, but understand that the big radio conglomerates look at podcasting as a way for them to take their message to the masses. They're listeners. We're listeners. Us podcasters are podcast listeners. We listen to content. They make audio content, therefore we should listen. It's easy. It's easy. Nothing new about this. But the big new thing that we podcasters need to be aware of is that big radio companies like CBS and iHeart are pouring lots of money and have been pouring lots of money in the way of on-air spots trying to tell people, their listeners, to go listen to their podcasts. Not necessarily on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or the places that most podcast consumers go, but through a dedicated app just for them. The iHeart Radio app, the BB Sounds app, the radio.com app, those sorts of things. Now, when you listen to the podcast pundits, like me, you'll note that we don't talk much about those radio station apps because they tend to be very, very small as far as the total percentage of market share they have when looking at podcasting overall. We tend to focus on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, etc. But even with small percentages, the audience of podcasting is growing in a big way. And these radio stations keep pounding out to their listeners over and over again, listen to Two Dorks with a Microphone on the morning on the iHeartRadio app. These people are using that app to listen to that content. And they may not be exploring too terribly far beyond that. They may just be listening to the content on demand that they are told to listen to by the broadcasters listening live. So I've said before, you should clearly get your podcasts into all of these apps if you can. Radio.com, you can. iHeartRadio's app, you can. All podcasters should be listed there. But today, I want to take one step further with that. I've been thinking about how we could leverage these apps better. And here's what I've settled on. You know how before I've told you that on your main podcast page, you really shouldn't give everybody unlimited choices. You shouldn't list all of the 50 places your podcast is available. That to me is just overkill. I want to make it easy for the new listener. So I'm going to list things like Apple Podcasts. I'm going to list Spotify. I'm going to list Google Podcasts. And maybe I'm going to list Pandora. And that's it. Well, what if I told you you should also list one or more of those big radio station apps, like iHeart or radio.com? Why would you do that? The reason you would do that is for the person who hears about your program, searches for your content, whatever, who doesn't know anything about you, doesn't know anything about podcasting beyond what they've heard. If they manage to get to your page somehow, sent there by a friend, who knows? When they come to that page, they don't know what the Apple Podcasts and the Google Podcasts are all about. They may not be big music listeners, so they don't want Spotify or Pandora. But if they see a radio station icon, click, their brain suddenly understands, oh, that's radio, the thing I've been listening to for 50 years. I understand that I get talky stuff on the radio. That means this person here I'm looking at is on that radio thing. Rather than getting up out of my chair and running to a radio dial, that's not going to happen. I'm just going to click on that really recognizable radio button and see what that's all about. Bingo. You've got a listener that you weren't getting previously, now understanding that there's something they can use that they recognize to listen to your content. So first off, make sure you're listed on the radio.coms and the iHeart Radio apps. And then make sure you're able to actually link directly and deeply into your show. Don't send them to those apps and say, now search for my show. Please don't do that ever. Always make sure it's a deep link to your content. That'll help. Because the radio stations continue to push the message that they have this podcast app. Their listeners will eventually grab it. Look, podcasts rising all over the place. Apple Podcasts is moving up. Spotify's taken lots of market share. I think these radio stations are also doing the same. They're creating their own new market share by bringing new listeners into the party. So let's take advantage of that branding, podcasters. Let's take advantage of all of that new awareness that radio broadcasters are giving, that these radio networks are giving to podcasting, and capitalize on it by simply putting on the logos and links to those particular apps. I'll be working on that this weekend for my show. I'm not sure which of the two I'm going to add, or both. I probably won't do both, but regardless, I will be listing one of those on podcastpontifications.com, as well as all of the episode pages of podcastpontifications.com, which I really need to get to its own hosting company, but that's another thing altogether. So that's my charge to you. Now, next week I will be traveling, so you won't get a show from me on Monday or Tuesday. However, I will be back on Wednesday, I think. Yeah, definitely Wednesday and Thursday. So 2 shows from me coming out still this week, so you'll still get more content for me, and then back on the regular wagon of 4 times a week production. So don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. While I'm away, if you feel like it, go to ratethispodcast.com/podpunt. ratethispodcast.com/podpunt and leave me a rating. It goes to all of the various apps, and it's keyed into what you're, looking at right now. So you don't know. People wonder where to do it. Right there. Also, go to buymeacoffee.com/evoterra if you want to help keep the show running. Buymeacoffee.com/evoterra. And if your business needs help with its podcasting strategy, that is what we do at Simpler Media Productions. Go to simplermedia.pro for more information. That's it. Enjoy your weekend. See you back next Wednesday with yet another Podcast Pontifications. Cheers!